Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 26 of Buha's Block. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a mailbag. It's been a couple of weeks since I did one. As a reminder, if you want me to answer your question in the next mailbag, drop it in the comment section below. And as you guys know the drill, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube, and make sure you hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your podcast platform of choice if you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes. With all that said, let's get into the mailbag. All right, first question from @DarvinHamHater. What is the most likely route for the Lakers to go this offseason? 3 stars or depth? Well, this to me has become the most interesting question of the Lakers offseason now. I think we have a little bit of clarity with the coaching situation. It seems to be trending in a certain direction. And as we've reported at The Athletic, the Lakers are willing to offer LeBron James whatever type of contract he wants, be it a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, 3 years, and be it him opting out and re-signing or him opting in and extending. So those two situations seem to have some sort of resolution. Of course, LeBron could opt out and leave, or opt out and they could execute a sided trade with another team, and like that would clearly disrupt the Lakers offseason plans. But barring something like that happening, really the two pivot points right now for the Lakers are what happens with D'Angelo Russell and what happens with their roster build in terms of, do they go after that third star, put in all their assets, put in multiple rotation guys, or are they potentially using those assets to upgrade those rotation guys and maintaining the core of the team, the depth of the team, and just maybe tweaking a piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, what have you. So I think this is the most fascinating question for the Lakers, because it's really going to determine the end of the LeBron AD era to some extent, because whichever path they choose, they're likely using a couple picks in either direction. So they're kind of out of bullets at that point, and they can still make a move at the 2025 trade deadline or in the 2025 offseason, but they're not going to have as many assets to really upgrade the roster. So this is the one at bat for them, and I'm interested to see which way they take it. So as far as what I think the Lakers are going to do, my sense right now is they're leaning more toward upgrading the supporting cast rather than the 3-star model. And I say that for a couple reasons. One, it's difficult to trade for a star. There's going to be a lot of competition this offseason. So I think if a star is willing to demand a trade and say that they only want to go to the Lakers, or make it a very short list where the Lakers have the assets to compete with the teams on that list, then sure, I think the Lakers can land that type of star. But there's also a lot of uncertainty right now where we don't know which star is going to be available in Cleveland. Is Donovan Mitchell going to accept that extension and then Darius Garland is the one asking out? Or is Donovan Mitchell going to reject the extension offer and all of a sudden he's available? We don't know which star guard is going to be available in Atlanta. We don't know if there's going to be another star that becomes available. Is Mikal Bridges available in Brooklyn, right? So there's still a lot of uncertainty as of right now in terms of which stars are actually going to be available closer to the draft and free agency, when the Lakers would be potentially looking to make a big splashy trade. So there's a lot of uncertainty with just who are the stars even available. If you go the 3-star route, you are going to be pushing past that first apron, getting close to the second apron, and not having a lot of resources to build out the rest of the roster, especially depending on who you're giving up in that trade. They might not even be able to get that guy just because of the bidding war that could be created on an open market. So I would lean more toward just the upgrading the supporting cast route, and maybe it's attaching something to Rui Hachimura or Gabe Vincent, or one of these mid-sized salaries that they flip 1 or 2 of those guys with a pick or 2, maybe even all 3, depending on what they're getting back, and going that route and building around LeBron, AD, Austin. And then I think everyone else is sort of movable. And then the other thing is, I mentioned D'Angelo Russell, like his decision, whether he opts in, whether he opts out and then looks to re-sign, or looks to do a sign-in trade with another team, or just leaves, like that decision will have an impact on how the Lakers build out their roster and what's available to them. If he opts in, all of a sudden they have an $18.7 million expiring contract that they can use to trade. And that gets you, like, that plus Rui gets you in the conversation with most stars or a couple role players back. So you do have some nice flexibility there if D'Angelo Russell ends up opting in. If he opts out, it gets a little tricky because now you either lose him for nothing or you re-sign him and then you can't trade him until a certain date, be it December 15th or January 15th, or you sign and trade him and then you create a trade exception, or you're getting something back in that sign and trade. So there's still a lot of uncertainty with this whole situation, but my sense right now is the Lakers are more leaning toward upgrading the supporting cast. I've been saying that for a few weeks on here now. Of course, I expect them to look into the 3-star build and see who's available and what the price is. If Donovan Mitchell is available, that is someone that they have interest in, someone that they view as a top 20 player, they view as a really good number 3 next to LeBron and AD, someone that could grow with AD in the future as the co-star of the franchise. So like that might be an exception in terms of 3-star versus upgrading the supporting cast. But right now, I would say if I had to predict how the offseason goes, I would lean more toward them just upgrading the supporting cast. But we shall see as it continues to unfold and I hear new information. I will keep you guys up to date. Next question from @JojoBones28. How strong are the JJ rumblings? Also, do they have to wait until after the finals to officially hire him, and why? The JJ rumbles are strong. As I said on here, from the moment his name was attached to the Lakers, I've been hearing that he was initially a slight favorite, and that has become stronger and stronger over the last couple of weeks. All the buzz around the league is that he is the front runner to be the Lakers' next head coach. As for the timing, it's still unclear. Obviously, he is supposed to be calling the finals for ESPN. So there are 3 ways that this can play out, right? So one, it could be announced potentially between the conference finals and finals that he is the Lakers head coach, but then he doesn't join the Lakers officially until after the finals. It could be announced before the finals and he leaves ESPN and joins the Lakers. That one I think is the least likely, but still certainly possible. And then there's the scenario in which they wait until during or after the finals and then he joins the Lakers. I've heard different things in terms of how it's likely to play out. So I don't have a great read, but it is certainly a complicating factor. And it does seem like there is a chance that he isn't officially joining the Lakers until after the finals, which would give him about a 1-week runway up into the June 26th draft. So certainly something to monitor here as this situation unfolds, but the rumblings are very strong. I've been saying that for over 3 weeks now, and similar to the free agency and trade stuff, if I hear anything different, I will let you guys know. Next question from @_allballsports. Do you think the Lakers should go after Mikal Bridges since the Nets look like they're going into a rebuild? So the Nets should be going into a rebuild. I don't know that they necessarily are. They've been a weird team based on their decision-making over the last couple of years. I think they've mismanaged a lot of their assets and have waited too long to trade guys. I think not trading Dorian Finney-Smith at the deadline was a mistake. I think they should have traded Mikal Bridges. I believe there was at one point, Memphis offered them like 4 or 5 first-round picks. They are not getting that again for Mikal Bridges. And going back to the Lakers talks with the Nets for Kyrie Irving around the 2023 trade deadline, they were hesitant to give up certain role players in that deal because they wanted to remain competitive around Kevin Durant. And then Kevin Durant shortly after asked out for a trade, and then he ended up in Phoenix. So that was kind of a nonsensical decision by them. So I'm not sure exactly what Brooklyn is doing. If Mikal Bridges is available, I think Mikal Bridges would be a great fit. To me, he's almost a middle path in between the 3-star and supporting cast builds, where he is technically a star, all-star level guy, though he did have a bit of a down year last year. And it's clear he should not be your number 1 and probably should not even be your number 2. But he does have the history of being a 3-and-D role player. And I see him as someone who could check multiple boxes. And he can check some of that star boxes of he can get you 20 points on a given night. He can shoulder more of the offensive burden And I think it is a nice piece to have next to Anthony Davis longer term, while also checking some of those role player boxes in terms of spot up shooting, his catch and shoot ability, his perimeter defense, his athleticism, his length, just some of those things that the Lakers have needed more of. Now, in this scenario, if you're the Lakers, you really would prefer to keep Austin Reeves, because I think trading him and losing D'Lo, you are now decimated from a shot making, shot creation, and playmaking standpoint from the backcourt. I think it creates a giant hole there. So if there's a way to acquire Mikal Bridges with the 3 picks and keep Austin Reeves, I love that fit. Let's say it's like Rui, Vando, and 3 picks and JHS, something like that. Ballparking, I don't know the salaries off the top of my head, but now all of a sudden, if you have a starting lineup of like Edey, LeBron, Mikal Bridges, Austin, and Gabe Vincent, you have a couple 3-and-D guys now replacing Rui Hachimura and D'Angelo Russell, and one who can do more than just be a 3-and-D guy in Mikal Bridges. But you got some solid perimeter defense there. You got some solid shooting there. And I think that's a really talented starting lineup. So again, I don't know what exactly Brooklyn is doing. I don't know what they want to do. They have been asking for a ransom price for Mikal Bridges in the past. I don't know if they soften that stance. And there will be other teams that get involved for Bridges, maybe Houston, Philadelphia, Miami, similar to some of the teams that will be interested in Donovan Mitchell. All those teams are going to be star hunting to an extent, depending on who's available. For what it's worth, Mikal and Austin also have a really good relationship from Team USA. So that would be another factor here. So if there's a way to get Mikal and keep Austin, however unlikely that is, I think that would be something that would make a lot of sense for the Lakers. And I really like that quartet of LeBron, Edey, Mikal, and Austin. Next question from @MarshawnWorld. Who are non-star trade targets you think could be interesting for the Lakers? Example, Dorian Finney-Smith, Wendell Carter, Alex Caruso, etc. I like this question a lot, and I'm going to expand it to some free agency options as well, because as you're about to see, the trade options are scarce. Really looking around the league right now, you can talk yourself into as few as like 5 to 8 potential sellers right now, where the rest of the league is going for it. Like, look at the West, for example. Outside of Utah, San Antonio, and Portland, where are the sellers? And even San Antonio might be going for it now with Wemby entering year 2, looking like a top 20 guy already. So you might only have Portland and Utah as sellers in the West. And then looking at the East, there's a few more teams, but with how low the win threshold is in the East to get into the play-in mix, some of these teams could talk themselves into either trying to stay competitive or trying to become more competitive. So there just aren't a lot of sellers right now, and that complicates the trade market a bit. Barring outside of like the big name stars and the teams really shaking things up, it's like a lot of these teams aren't willing to give up a good 3-and-D guard or 3-and-D wing or a starting caliber big man. So the names I wrote in kind of going team by team and looking at who could potentially be available. I have here Kyle Kuzma in Washington, Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon in Portland, and maybe DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta as like 4 names that I think all 4 of those guys could help the Lakers. Brogdon I view as a D'Lo replacement if D'Lo walks or is signed and traded to another team. Then DeAndre Hunter, something fits the profile of a 3-and-D wing. Jeremy Grant, Kyle Kuzma, those are a couple guys Lakers had interest in during the trade season last year. Kuzma, obviously, former Laker. There's a lot of history there. But both guys, I think, could slide in and be that third front court player next to LeBron and AD. Shooting is a bit of a concern there with both guys, but both guys have a certain level of scoring chops. Both guys can play the 3 and the 4. Both guys are decent rebounders for their size and with their length and athleticism. So I think both guys would be solid fits in the front court and certainly upgrades over Rui Hachimura. But let's quickly go through. I'm going to list a bunch of names, but I'm just like, it's not the sexiest list, right? So looking at some of the trade guys, I think you laid it out well with Dorian Finney-Smith, Alex Caruso, Wendell Carter. Like, those are the 3 player archetypes where you got a 3-and-D wing with Dorian Finney-Smith, a defensive-minded, athletic big guard with Alex Caruso, and then a solid big in Wendell Carter who could start next to AD and LeBron or come off the bench and be like a 20 to 25 minute a night bench guy playing alongside AD in certain lineups and then being a center himself in others. So I think these are some guys that could be available for the Lakers with the non-taxpayer. Maybe some of these guys for the taxpayer. So as a reminder, non-taxpayer is about $12.9 million per year. You don't have to spend all of that on a player. You could split that among a couple of these guys, but some of these guys will certainly command upwards of that 12.9 range. And then some of these guys, 5.2. This isn't the best list, but this is what the Lakers are going to be dealing with. DeAnthony Melton, Derek Jones Jr., who hell of a playoffs for him. He was a minimum guy last year. One of the arguably the best minimum signing of the entire offseason. Kelly Oubre, another solid minimum guy who exceeded expectations in Philadelphia. Gary Trent Jr., a guy the Lakers have been linked to for a bit. Royce O'Neal, a guy the Lakers have had interest in the last couple of trade deadlines. I thought he was solid for Phoenix, and I think he'd be a good addition as a 3-and-D wing. Chris Paul, if waived. Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report came on this very podcast and reported that of the Lakers' interest in Chris Paul, and that's been picking up some steam over the past week or so. Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, Gary Payton II, Dennis Smith Jr., Patrick Williams, though he is a restricted free agent. I really like Patrick Williams, though. Alec Burks, Justin Holiday, Najee Marshall, and Haywood Highsmith, though. I don't know if the Lakers want to sign any former Miami Heat players, but I do think Haywood Highsmith is a sneaky addition. And then free agent bigs, Andre Drummond, Jonas Valanciunas, Daniel Theis, Xavier Tillman. So it's not like none of these guys are really changing the Lakers dramatically. Like ideally you add a couple of these guys and it's not just like spending that 12.9 on one, although depending on how the market plays out, several of these guys are going to command 12.9. Several of these guys could even get like, does Derek Jones Jr. get the Bruce Brown treatment? Of all the names that we've discussed, Alex Caruso to me is the most impactful of these guys, but Kyle Kuzma and Jeremy Grant are not far behind him. Then among the free agency guys, like I do like Melton a lot. I like Jones Jr. I like Trent Jr. I like O'Neal. I like Caleb Martin, Nicholas Batum on a cheaper deal. If they don't go the 3-star route again, I look at, can they get like Dorian Finney-Smith is another guy that I think would be a great fit. Like he's probably the ideal 3-and-D wing among all these guys, arguably the best option. So those are some of the names that I think could be interesting both as free agency targets and trade targets. I will be doing a deep dive on free agency and rankings and tiers and the different player archetypes that I think could help the Lakers in a couple weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And I hope this sort of answered your question. I think we're going to see, like, there's still also guys who have player options that could be added to this list depending on what happens. Again, like Chris Paul technically is under contract with the Warriors. So there could be some additional names coming up here. But for now, this is a preliminary look at who could be available on the trade market as well as in free agency. Next question from @Aaron Sadiq24. Are the Lakers actively shopping Rui, and do we actually want to trade him or just looking around to see what his value is like? So this is a bit of a tricky one to answer just because I don't think the Lakers are actively shopping Rui or actively looking to trade him. It's just if you look at their cap sheet and you look at who are the tradable guys, it's really Rui, Vando, Austin, D'Lo, if he opts in, and Gabe. And then some smaller contracts like a JHS, a Christian Wood, Maxwell Lewis, etc. But like the mid-sized contracts, those are the contracts that you cobble together to acquire another star or you cobble together to acquire a higher impact role player. And then if you look at the numbers, Rui Hachimura is making the most money out of all these guys outside of D'Lo, but D'Lo might not be available to trade depending on what he does with his player options. So I think it's more so the circumstance of the Lakers have to trade someone. And when looking at the mid-sized salaries, the guy they would love to keep is Austin Reeves. I think everyone else is movable to an extent. So they're going to try and use some of those guys, be it Rui and Vando, Rui and Gabe, Rui and D'Lo, if D'Lo is available to be traded. So I think it's less about actively trying to get Rui off the roster and more so a realistic look at if we are going to improve the roster, we likely have to trade Rui. By no means are they just trying to like dump Rui somewhere. You could certainly do something like Gabe and Vando, though that's a lot of perimeter defense and energy and grit out the door. But there are different ways this can all play out. And teams are certainly going to ask for Austin Reeves, and the Lakers are going to fight them on that and try and keep Austin Reeves. But when trying to match salaries and project realistic trades, Rui is almost certainly going to have to be involved. And that's just the reality of the matter. Next question from @Hoope Fiasco. What archetype guys would you put around a trio of Trae, AD, and Bron? First of all, that is an amazing name. Hoope Fiasco. I love that. But you want guys like Vando and Gabe around those three. You want 3-and-D role players. You want defensive-minded guys who can play off the ball, good spot-up shooters, good cutters, guys who are going to be relatively low usage because the ball is going to primarily be in the hands of Trae and LeBron. It's going to be a lot of Trae LeBron pick and roll, a lot of Trae AD pick and roll. AD will get his post touches and his pick and pops and his slips and whatnot. But the offense would certainly change if you added a high usage guy like Trae, and he would certainly have to make a lot of adjustments in terms of learning to play more off the ball and learning to cede control of the offense to both LeBron and AD. And ideally, you make him more of the number 3 option, which would be really a massive adjustment for him, going from being the number 1 guy in Atlanta for so long and not only being the number 1 guy, but being the number 1 guy in terms of usage by a wide margin. And that at times has been a struggle for him with DeJounte Murray. And that's sort of, I think, what's going to lead to their likely breakup over this summer has just been, Trae plays a certain way, DeJounte plays a certain way, and it hasn't always meshed. But bringing him to LA, you are now potentially facing some similar problems, and having a guy going from being number 1 to number 3, that's not always an easy adjustment. So looking at the other positions, like you certainly need a good backcourt defender next to Trae, a guy that can take on those point guard assignments. So you're not putting Trae on De'Aaron Fox or Steph Curry or Jalen Brunson, etc. So you probably need a couple of quality 3-and-D wings / guard, a guard and a forward next to Trae, LeBron, and AD. The problem is you're relatively limited in how you build out the rest of your roster. And if you're throwing everything in, if you're throwing in Austin and Rui and Gabe or Vando, whatever makes the salaries match, like it, all of a sudden, like you don't have that quality depth and you don't have some of those defensive pieces. And the more I've looked at the potential 3rd-star options, the more I think that the Trae Young one is the most complicated. And it's not due to talent. Like I think talent-wise, he's as good as any of the names linked to the Lakers. I would put Donovan Mitchell ahead of him, but you can make the case that peak Trae is right there with Donovan, but the adjustment offensively in terms of him accepting a smaller role and learning how to play off the ball, and then number 2 defensively, he's just a considerable liability on that end, and you really have to game plan. And of course, having Anthony Davis certainly tilts you in the right direction, but you need to nail your perimeter options as well. And depending on if the Lakers have a Vando or Gabe, that is a nice start, but they're going to need at least 2 to 3 more solid perimeter defenders, and those guys aren't cheap. And with the Lakers' resources, they might be able to get one with a non-taxpayer MLE, but beyond that, at that point, they don't have. They're going to be a bunch of minimum guys, and looking at the roster, if they're giving up all the mid-size guys, I think they'd be in a bit of a tricky spot. But ideally, it is role players with size, with length, defensive-minded guys, and then offensively, guys who complement the stars well, good cutters and good spot-up shooters. Next question @Laka Orge. D'Angelo Russell, re-sign, sign and trade. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. If you're asking what I think is going to happen with D'Angelo Russell, so there are a few options here, right? He can opt out and re-sign. He can opt out and sign with another team. He can opt out and be signed and traded to another team, or he can opt in. So those are the four possibilities in terms of what could happen with D'Angelo Russell this offseason. If I had to rank them, it's tricky. I think the one I will say to your question, the one I see that the least likely is a opt out and sign and trade. If he's opting out, unless it's a team that doesn't have cap space that really wants him, certainly that's a possibility, as Eric and I discussed on the salary cap breakdown episode. But it can get a little tricky in terms of making that work. So I see it more realistically. If he's opting out, he's either re-signing or he's signing elsewhere. I would put those as more likely than a sign and trade, because with a sign and trade, you get hard capped, and a team has to really like D'Angelo Russell and also have a certain level of cap flexibility to execute that type of deal. And then for the Lakers, it's either taking back certain contracts, and that could be an appealing option, or creating a trade exception, which also is an appealing option. So like for the Lakers side, that would be ideal, but I'm not necessarily seeing a suitor out there who's going to do that. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I'm a bit skeptical. And then him opting in, that's really just a read on the market in terms of if he opts out, I don't see the Lakers offering him a pay raise. I think it would be either around the same range or a little bit below. And then if he goes to the open market, I'm sure he'll get plenty of interest around the non-taxpayer MLE, but are there any teams out there other than maybe Orlando or San Antonio that are willing to offer him more than that? And of course, he and his representation are going to be doing their due diligence over the next month in terms of what his potential market is, what are the moving chairs in free agency, and what opportunities could be out there for him. So that will certainly determine what he ultimately decides to do. But I think right now, I would say him opting out is more likely than him just opting in and staying in LA. From that point on, who knows? We're still a month out. There has been some buzz about him potentially just opting out and signing elsewhere. Orlando has been the suitor most linked to him, but I think it's still a month out. It's too early to tell what exactly D'Lo's market is going to be. Part of it depends on other guys and their player options and who's actually going to be available, and teams and players will have communications, some of it legal, some of it not, over the next month. And as that stuff starts to get determined, we will get a better read on D'Lo, because for as good of a season as he had, he's not a LeBron, a Paul George, a James Harden, a Tyrese Maxey. He's not some of these top level guys that are really going to be the significant players in free agency. And then from that point on, there's a trickle down effect that will ultimately determine the way that D'Lo's offseason unfolds. Next question from @2weekswithpay. Do you think this year's playoffs demonstrate to the front office that adding size with vertical spacing and rim protection is the way to go, i.e. the 2019-20 roster construction? Yes, I do think that this playoff run is going to influence the Lakers. Now, to what extent remains to be seen, but I think the Lakers are going to try and beef up the perimeter defense, beef up the perimeter length, beef up the front court. They are aware that they need a better backup center or second big man, whatever you want to call it, than a Christian Wood or a Jackson Hayes. And I think the one mistake the Lakers have made here, as I've discussed, is they have often signed minimum bigs, and they've had some moments of success with some of these guys, but for the most part, it's been fleeting, and they've gotten minimum level production from most of their centers over the last few years. So I think it's more about, like, they struck gold with JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard in the championship season. They also had solid production from Marc Gasol and Andre Drummond, who were both on minimum contracts during that 2020-2021 season. But since then, it's been a bunch of misses with DeAndre Jordan. Dwight Howard, the third time around, was like a once a week, he'd give you a solid game, and then the rest of the time he was on his last legs, and there was a reason why he has not been really in the NBA since then. But DeAndre, Dwight, Damian Jones, Thomas Bryant, Tristan Thompson, Wenyen Gabriel, this year, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood. Those are all fringe rotation guys at best, and not guys who could start next to AD or properly back him up in a playoff series against a Jokic or an Embiid or whatever elite big man the Lakers are potentially facing in the playoffs. So I think the Lakers need to reevaluate how they have approached the big man position, and be it trading for one or investing part of that non-taxpayer MLE in one. They need to bring in a better second big, a guy who is clearly better than Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood. I think the challenge here is those guys aren't necessarily easy to find. There's going through the playoffs. Like, this is a problem for a lot of teams. A lot of teams are going to be trying to solve this issue. Denver doesn't have a quality backup big. Oklahoma City doesn't have a quality backup big. The Suns didn't have a quality backup big. The Clippers were a bit of a mixed bag behind Ivica Zubac. The Pelicans are looking to likely move on from Jonas Valanciunas. So a lot of teams are not happy with their center rotation and their big man spots, and the Lakers are going to have some competition, be it in trades or on the free agent market, but it needs to be more of a priority than it's been over the last few years. And if they just run it back with Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood, or Christian Wood and another vet minimum center, barring that guy being an impactful player who's taking a discount or a hidden gem that people are underrating, I think it's going to be a mistake by the Lakers, and another season in which they're not prioritizing enough size and length, and more specifically, playable size and length, scalable size and length that can, Christian Wood was supposed to fill in for Anthony Davis on the nights AD was out. Now, AD didn't miss many games, but he also did not fill in my opinion, very well in those opportunities. So I think they need someone better than Wood. I think they need someone better than Hayes. And again, it's going to be a challenge to find that guy, but that is part of the challenge of building a championship level roster. Next question at Dougie_fresh055. Do you think the Lakers should draft Zach Edey if they use the 17th pick? They've been a mess at backup center for years now. I purposely chose this question next as it builds upon the previous question. So if the Lakers end up keeping that number 17 pick, and maybe there isn't a lot of value in their 2024 pick, and they end up just flipping the 2029 and 2031 picks, I think Zach Edey makes sense for them. Now, there's been some buzz that he might be a lottery pick and that he's really impressed during the pre-draft process. So he might not even be available at number 17. But if the Lakers do keep their number 17 pick, I think the one thing they should not do is draft a guard. They have enough guards. They either need a big 3D wing, like I'm talking 6'7", 6'8", or bigger, or a big man. I think Edey is an interesting option insofar as he appears to be NBA ready, and he could probably play 8 to 15 minutes off the bench, depending on how you build your defensive scheme, depending on what lineups and players you're putting around him. But could he be Boban Marjanovic from a few years ago and just basically be a solid backup center who, like when he's in, you can run some post-ups for him, and he's just going to be big and use that 7'3", 7'4" frame to protect the rim, rebound, and just be a rim deterrent. And of course, playing primarily against second units and not against high-level starters and whatnot. But Zach Edey, if he's available there, I think he is an intriguing prospect. He's a very polarizing prospect. A lot of people have strong opinions one way or the other about him. Again, he might not be available there with how the pre-draft process has gone, but if he is, I think he is someone who makes sense and is someone who could potentially plug in right away for the Lakers, which I think at this point is part of what they're looking for. Is that they're looking for either young talent with high upside that will grow in the next 2 to 3 years, or a guy who can come in right away. Now, based on LeBron and AD's championship window, I think it would make more sense to lean toward the win now option, but we'll see if the Lakers even keep this pick. I'm a bit skeptical, but if they do, I think a player like Edey makes a lot of sense. Next question from at Yeez Addy. Was Kyrie really an option, or did the Nets owner really hate Kyrie? Number 2, does the Lakers tax exist? Yes, Kyrie Irving really was an option for the Lakers. They went after him a couple of times. You had me going back in my notebook and looking back at the stories I wrote for The Athletic and my reporting on the situation. But as I reported after Kyrie ended up going to Dallas, there were 3 sticking points that I had heard from both Lakers and league sources. And to preface all this is all stuff I've previously reported at The Athletic. So for the aggregators, please don't take this and say this is new information. But the first sticking point was there was uncertainty regarding Kyrie and his contract. He was about to be an unrestricted free agent in 2023. And given some of the uncertainty surrounding him at the time, the Lakers wanted to sign him to a 2-year contract extension, but Kyrie wanted to opt out and become a free agent and seek a 4-year longer term deal. And the Lakers were a bit hesitant with that 4-year deal. They preferred a 2-year, I believe it was about 2-year, $80 million extension. So the fact that Kyrie wasn't willing to sign that extension, LA was a bit skittish in terms of acquiring him and the flight risk of him potentially leaving if it didn't work out that summer. They also did not want to include Austin Reeves and Max Christie if Kyrie wasn't willing to sign the extension. So had he been willing to sign the extension, I believe they would have been willing to part with one. I think they were going to fight to keep at least one of the two, but they didn't want to give up what they viewed were their 2 most valuable young assets in terms of players at the time for a guy who could potentially leave in the summer. So they really value those 2. And the third sticking point is hilarious in retrospect, but that was the Nets not wanting to give up any additional role players in the trade to the Lakers because they wanted to remain competitive around Kevin Durant, though shortly after Kevin Durant demanded a trade, and the rest is history. He ends up in Phoenix. Kyrie goes to Dallas. At the time, LeBron made his feelings known publicly. If you remember, when Kyrie requested a trade, LeBron tweeted the eyes emoji with the crown emoji. Then after Kyrie was traded to Dallas, LeBron tweeted, "Maybe it's me." LeBron wanted Kyrie. The Lakers wanted Kyrie. There was just some uncertainty with his behavior and some of the recent stuff that had gone on. And then on top of that, just the contract situation and LA not being willing to take on the risk and to trade some of their younger guys to make that happen. They were also offering 2 first-round picks where ultimately Dallas got him for 1. So to the second part of your question, there is something of a Lakers tax. Yes, that is something that some with the Lakers believe. If you see some of the packages that certain guys go for, and then behind the scenes, some of the things that you hear the Lakers offered, it seems to be the Lakers offer X, and then another team offers Y, which is a little bit less than X, yet that team ends up getting that player. As an example, the Lakers were willing to trade 2 firsts to Brooklyn for Kyrie Irving, and instead, Brooklyn ends up accepting 1 first from the Dallas Mavericks, along with 2 second-round picks. So, of course, there are other complicating factors. Brooklyn didn't really want to take on Russell Westbrook, and that Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, the 2 guys they acquired in that trade, were better fits around Kevin Durant. So I think there is something to the notion of a Lakers tax. I don't think there's some league-wide conspiracy against the Lakers where no one wants to help them or like they've done plenty of deals in recent years. But I do think there are teams and owners and GMs that try to extract more out of them than other teams in certain scenarios. And I think it has hurt the Lakers at times. You talk to different people, you hear different reasons why, but for whatever the reasons are, there is a little bit of a Lakers tax. And I think that has played out in several of their recent trade negotiations. Next question at Stretch for Podcast. After seeing Zach LaVine show up to Klutch Pro Day to see Bronny James and shake LeBron and AD's hand, is there any chance that Zach is trying to force his way to LA? I don't view it in that manner. Zach has ties to LA. He went to UCLA. A lot of guys are in LA over the offseason. It is the unofficial NBA capital of the offseason. A lot of guys have apartments, condos, houses out here, and then will live out here, train out here, go out here. So I think Zach was probably in LA. He's a Klutch client. They had Klutch Pro Day. He decided to go see some of his Klutch colleagues, see his agents, and I think it was more about that than anything. Now, I did hear during the season that Zach was intrigued by the potential of being a Laker, and that was around the time the Zach to LA rumors started. I want to say that was like late November, December range. So around that time through January, I was hearing that he had interest in potentially being in LA, potentially being a Laker. Of course, it didn't play out that way. He ended up getting injured again and having foot surgery, and the Lakers shifted more toward DeJounte Murray and trying to acquire him. Now, could those talks be revisited this summer? I don't know. I would guess not. I think if you look at what the Lakers need, Zach LaVine checks some of the boxes, but he is a step down from the Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young tier. Might maybe a couple steps down from that tier. There's also now a mounting history of injuries with him, particularly lower extremity injuries with his knees and now his feet. So I think the injury history mixed with him not being at the level of third star that the Lakers are looking for, that combination to me makes it unlikely he ends up being a Laker. But I wouldn't read too much into that. I think it was more so he was probably just in LA, had some free time and wanted to go to an event from his agency. And even if it was him campaigning to be a Laker, I don't see that happening. And final question from @HRLakeShow. Hey, Jovan, in your opinion, do you think the Lakers will have a bright future post-LeBron? I do think the Lakers have a bright future post-LeBron. I will note that, in my opinion, this is one of the arguments for trading for a third star, is if hypothetically you bring in a Donovan Mitchell, you now have the next face of the franchise alongside Anthony Davis. And if LeBron retires in a year or 2 years, you have that foundation of AD and Donovan Mitchell, which you could ride through potentially the rest of the decade. Whereas if you don't acquire that player, now all of a sudden you're either hoping to acquire them in the draft, though you have traded some of your picks, most likely to upgrade the supporting cast, or you're trying to trade for a guy with limited means to acquire a star in terms of like trade assets, or you're trying to sign a guy, which, as we've seen in free agency recently, it's become a little trickier to sign stars. A lot of stars are now moving via trade, like taking the guaranteed money, extending, re-signing, whatever, waiting a year, and then demanding a trade and getting moved that way. So a lot of free agency is happening outside of actual free agency. I think it gets a little trickier for LA to find that guy if they don't use their assets right now, because they're going, like, of course the asset cupboard will be replenished in a couple of years or a few years. But I think that's one argument in favor of getting that third star, especially if you have confidence that that star will complement AD for the rest of the decade. But that aside, I think the Lakers will always be a destination. I just think there's something about playing in the purple and gold. I think that LeBron gave the franchise some juice again by coming there and showing that even a guy like LeBron, who is already the best player in the world and the biggest star in the world, was elevated to an even higher level, in my opinion, with the Lakers platform. I think it's been a mutually beneficial partnership for the most part. Then seeing AD come in and those two winning a championship, and AD going to a different level in terms of his stardom and his profile. Like, I think that stuff matters to star players. The Lakers will always be relevant, whether they are good or not. And I think that is attractive to a certain caliber of star. So I'm not saying, like, if LeBron retires in 2 years, the Lakers will probably have some sort of down period. And maybe at that point they have to consider, do we trade Anthony Davis and do we start a rebuild and recoup some assets from, for AD, get a couple of young guys, multiple picks, and go from there. So it's become difficult to project out too far with this NBA landscape. The cap's going up. The player movement continues to be at an all-time high. Parity in terms of there being a lot of talent and a lot of teams feeling like they can make a run. I think the Lakers being in LA, having the organization's brand and history will help them eventually get another star, be it someone next to Anthony Davis or be it someone to replace Anthony Davis. From that perspective, I think the future is bright. That said, once LeBron leaves, I do expect there to be some type of lull or some type of dip, unless they already have that star. So I will say yes, I think the Lakers will figure things out. And once they have an idea of LeBron's timeline, they'll be better able to prepare and plan for that. But I think they're the Lakers. They've rarely gone through down periods. They did go through that down period in the mid-2010s. I think they learned from that to some extent. I think they've still made some mistakes. There's still some areas that they can improve upon. But with this next head coach, theoretically, and with Anthony Davis, I think there's a good foundation there. And if they can continue to be successful and competitive over the next couple of years, I think that's going to attract more stars and better players to keep that going and kind of show that 2014 to 2017, 2018 period is behind them. And that was more of a blip on the radar rather than a harbinger for their future. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment and like this video if you enjoyed it. For those on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Friday with episode 27 of Buha's Block. I'll talk to you then.